and welcome to the Southeast Colorado Renewable Energy Society 2021 guest lecture series. I would like to jump right in and introduce our guest speaker tonight. Mr. Duane Highley serves as the CEO for Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association. Tri-State's 42 utility members systems serve 200,000 square miles across Colorado, Nebraska, New Mexico, and Wyoming, providing power to over 1 million customers. Duane joined Tri-State in 2019 and has 38 years of experience with cooperatives. He also serves as the co-chair of the Electric Subsector Coordinating Council, the ESCC, coordinating security efforts between electric utility CEOs and cabinet level officials of the U.S. government. So with that, I'm going to bring up your slides there, Duane, and the floor is yours.
And thank you all for inviting me to share just a little bit about our green energy transition at Tri-State. Tri-State is a nonprofit wholesale electric supply system serving 42 utility members across Nebraska, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico. So you can see that service territory goes all the way from just a tiny bit in Montana, all the way down to the border with Mexico. It is a space, if you could look at this on a national map, it would be larger than the state of California. So we serve, through our member systems, 7% of the continental USA. However, within that footprint that's so large, there's only about 1.4 million people that are served. So we do serve some of the most rural and most challenging, both geographically challenging areas and economically challenging areas. First of all, places that are very expensive to serve. And second of all, people who oftentimes are some of the most struggling themselves economically in these remote rural areas. So that's one of the big drivers for us. I have the privilege of facing a democratically elected board, representing every one of them a customer at the end of the line of their local electric cooperative or public power district. And so we have monthly board meetings, which seems like a lot, but every month those folks face me and I face them. And I think there's no better alignment than the cooperative business model, where you're talking to the customers, the people actually, everyone of them writes a check to their local electric co-op. And in every instance, Tri-State's wholesale power supply cost makes up more than half of their total cost of energy. So all of you co-op members know this, more than half the check you write every month for your local electric co-op's power is driven by power supply costs. Next slide, please. So this is what we're working on, kind of 4 key pillars for us as we move forward. And I'll talk in more detail about these 4. Reliability, affordability, flexibility, and responsible energy, responsible clean energy. And this is driven by our board of directors. They gave us this direction, gave me this direction when I came on board on April Fool's Day of 2019. And they've stuck with it and continue to push us to be more reliable, more affordable, more flexible, and cleaner and greener. So let's look at how we're doing that. Next slide, please. So I'm sure you can't read this because I can't, but what this is just to demonstrate that we do have a strategy here. There's a plan, and this is what we call our integrated strategy map. And Jim, if it's possible, we can make these slides available to the entire membership so that you can actually be able to read this slide, because I like this as a communication tool. We try to get on one sheet of paper all the key aspects of Tri-State strategy going forward, the key points of what we're trying to achieve here. And so you can see it all there. We read it from the bottom. Everything's built on our mission. So that's reliable, affordable, flexible, and responsible energy. And then our values as a cooperative being nonprofit, member owned, member serving. And then we build that up, how our responsibility to our employees, our responsibility to our communities. And then finally, those 4 strategic pillars: reliable, affordable, flexible, and responsible. And we have distinct, measurable goals within each of those 4 pillars. So that's the point of that slide. We'll move on and I'll talk some about each of those 4 pillars. Reliability. And this is something I just can't emphasize enough. As a power supplier, reliability is absolutely job 1 for us. If we fail on that, people could die. It is a very serious responsibility, something we take seriously. If you noticed what happened in Texas when they had those blackouts, I heard one number, 40 people died, another 80 people died. I don't know how many people did, One is too many, and when the lights go out, bad things happen. We know we have to keep the lights on. The electricity is one of those crazy commodities, right? If we quit providing it, if we don't sell it to people, they get mad. So we know that it's worth more than what people pay for it. But of course, as soon as the lights are on, the first thing everybody cares about is cost. They want the lowest possible cost. But really, reliability comes first for us. I did want to talk briefly about the weather event we had in February, because in my entire career, that was the time I was most worried about serving load. And never before have I had to intentionally interrupt customers in order to preserve the grid and keep from having widespread uncontrolled blackouts. But we did have to do that on the eastern part of our system in Nebraska. However, on the western grid, that we didn't have those issues, and actually we weathered this storm in February 13th through 17th far better than any of our neighboring peer utilities. I know some of you, especially if you're a customer of one of the local IOU investor-owned utilities, are experiencing large rate increases for the next 2 to 3 years to pay for 1 week's worth of power. Part of that was driven by extremely high natural gas prices, and what helped Tri-State during that was a diverse fuel mix, which included coal, gas, and oil. And we actually got off of gas and went to our oil backup, which kept us from having to pay for those high gas prices at the time when Public Service Colorado, or Xcel Energy, had $650 million of excess expense for that 1 week of power. Tri-State had 12 million. So we were able to mitigate that largely by having steel in the ground. Now we currently have, well, at that time we had 405 megawatts of wind. Now as of today, we have 509 megawatts of wind. So we're increasing that. But during the winter event, at the time of our peak and during those 5 days, we had about 5 megawatts out of 405 megawatts of wind. When it gets super, super cold, everything just gets really still and the wind quits blowing. Our peak occurred at 7 a.m., so the solar wasn't helping us. And so that's the times when we right now rely on fossil fuels, and I'll talk later, or we can do the Q&A and talk about how do we get past that and how do we get to a dispatchable, reliable resource so that we can meet our needs in 2030 and beyond. So let's look at the next slide, please. The next pillar is affordability. As I said, first thing, once the lights are back on, everybody wants it to be affordable. And our board gave us a goal in 2019 to say, as you make this green energy transition, can you also reduce rates? And so we set a goal to reduce rates, to get an 8% reduction by 2024. And while I don't know whether we'll meet that goal, because it's extremely challenging for us, we'll have to take $111 million of cost out of the organization. We have committed to 2 consecutive 2% rate decreases in the next 2 years. So that's 2% in 2021, and it'll be a total of 4% decrease by 2022. In fact, we're issuing the refund checks because it was retroactive back to March 1st. So our members are getting some refunds as I speak. And that's a green energy dividend. And it's also a result of extensive cost cutting that we're exercising right now. And so all members will benefit from that. And maybe if you say, well, gosh, 4% doesn't sound like that much, I'll ask you, have you heard of any other power supplier or power company who's talking about reducing rates in this environment and reducing rates as they make a green energy transition? I'm not aware of another. There might be one, but I'm just not aware of it. So we're working really hard and squeezing the organization. All employees are contributing to this effort, and it's really important on behalf of our members that we do what we can to help them with cost. Okay, next slide. I'm moving along. Flexibility is the next pillar. Our members have asked for more flexibility in their power supply. And Tri-State formerly had a limit of 5% self-supply for members. So a member could buy 95% of their energy from Tri-State. They could supply up to 5% with local renewable projects. Now we've increased that now. We added, first of all, another 2% for community solar projects. And now this very week, we have our open season where members can nominate to participate in an additional 300 megawatts system-wide, which represents roughly 10% of Tri-State's capacity. However, an individual member can nominate for up to 50% of their capacity to be supplied from either local renewables or a purchase in the open market. So this is providing a lot more flexibility for our members. And as we wrap up this week, we'll have some information from them on which ones are wishing to participate and explore that greater flexibility option. Next slide, please. So this is just kind of the recap of our responsible energy plan. Gives me some talking points so I don't forget things. The first bar there says by 2024, half the energy we supply to our members will be coming from clean energy sources. We used to say it was a third, or 32, 33%. Now that the new wind farm came on just this last week, 104 megawatts, Crossing Trails Wind Farm, the lowest cost resource on our system that just came online. And that pushes our renewables already up to 36 and 37%. And as again, by the time we get to 2024, we will have added 1,000 megawatts of additional wind and solar, which will get us to 50% across all the states in which we serve, not just Colorado. We've also committed through our energy resource plan filed with the Colorado PUC to deliver 70% clean energy across our entire footprint by 2030, and to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions for energy delivered to Colorado by 80% relative to a 2005 baseline by 2030. And carbon emissions within the state of Colorado itself will be reduced by 90% as part of that closure of coal plants in New Mexico and Colorado, and reductions in the amount of energy imported into Colorado from other states. The third bar there is more local renewables. So I mentioned we're building 1,000 megawatts right now. 100 megawatts of that just came online. So between now and 2024, another 900 megawatts of additional wind and solar. And then between 2024 and 2030, we're looking at another 1,850 megawatts, almost 2,000 megawatts more. So if you remember those numbers, we're going to be at over 3,000 megawatts of new capacity on top of what we already had. We will actually have more capacity of renewables than what we have peak demand on the system. And that's just in order to keep so much energy coming in, clean energy, to displace fossil fuel energy. That yellow bar talks about expanding electric vehicle infrastructure. We have now about 1,000 charging stations that we're, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Got a number of charging stations that we're putting in the rural communities, a high-speed charger at every one of our co-op members' systems, so that they can help reduce range anxiety as people try to cross the Continental Divide, and help for tourism, and help for people to just get out and enjoy an electric vehicle. As an aside, I was in Wyoming, and they said, I'm waiting until we have an electric pickup. And then when we talked about electric Hummer, they got very excited. So we know that's coming. Working with communities and employees affected by energy transition, I've got a slide on that, so I'll talk about that as we get there. So let's go ahead and advance. Okay, this just kind of restates what I've said: clean energy goals, emission reduction goals, greater flexibility for members. There's the 1,000, over 1,000 test drives for our member EV experience fleets. So what we did was bought some Teslas, which any of you that have driven a Tesla know it is a hoot to drive. And we're taking those out to the member systems, because it's been my experience, people say, I don't know about electric car. Once they get in and drive one and get that sense of like equivalent 700 horsepower or whatever it is, they're like, I want one of those. So we think it's been very beneficial for people to get the test drive, and it definitely changes their opinion about electric vehicles once they get in it. I'm hopeful that once we get the electric pickup truck or Hummer, we can acquire one of those and again, take it all around the system, let people take a test drive. And I think it'll make believers out of them. We've got the support for communities. So let me just talk about the just transition a little bit. When we retire coal from a community, they're typically very dependent on those jobs. Coal plant employs a lot of people, coal mine employs a lot of people, and they're usually some of the highest paying jobs in that county or even the surrounding counties. So it has an incredible economic impact when we talk about closing those facilities early. In the case of Grants, New Mexico, near Grants at the Escalante station, we retired that plant at the end of last year, premature, and it had an impact on the tax base. So to help, we are putting a 200 megawatt solar facility back on the site of the plant, which is equivalent to about $200 million of investment, helps restore tax base, in addition to providing generous severance packages for employees and support directly to the economic development units in those respective counties. We're also putting additional renewables at Kalawao Mine in anticipation of what's going to happen at Craig as we retire units in 2025, 2027, and 2028. So, okay, so, and then we have our rate reduction goal. Next slide, please. Finally, one more thing we're advocating for hard is regional organized power markets. Everything in the United States east of Colorado, if you think about it that way, is basically in organized markets. Eastern Grid and the ERCOT Texas Grid are managed and largely executed through organized power markets where utilities bid in a day in advance, It helps optimize the dispatch of resources. All the generating resources are dispatched as if it's one power system, get the very lowest cost of energy, and the very greatest ability to integrate massive amounts of renewables. Now, this map shows two colors of red. Bright red represents the Southwest Power Pool's fully integrated marketplace, and that's where they're dispatching power a day in advance across 14 states and getting incredible efficiencies. In addition, they've been setting new records on integration of renewables, and they just hit a new peak, 83% energy from wind, and it just keeps going up every year, and they've proven to the world it can be done. I'm one of those engineers who did studies in the 90s and said, yeah, we maybe can get 7 to 10%, and they went way past 70%. Now they're at 80%, and they're able to keep it all working because they run it as one complete grid. The dark red part of this map is the market that Tri-State's just joined and is advocating for, is to have a sub-hourly market. We call it the Western Energy Imbalance Service. So it doesn't give you all the benefits of a full regional market because it just optimizes resources that are already online. However, it provided benefits for Tri-State during this recent winter event, helped us serve load more reliably and at a lower cost. And we're looking forward to having other utilities join us. I know we've got some neighbors who are strongly interested, and we're especially looking forward to developing a full-blown day-ahead regional market, which will help us get past that 50% level and add additional renewables, the goals we're trying to meet by the end of this decade. Next slide. I think I'm about the end. Okay, so when we talk about community transition, which I already talked a little bit about, we're definitely interested in working with the local, state, and federal, state, local, and federal officials to help make the just transition more just. I'm really pleased to see that the state of Colorado has just put in a bill for $7 million for the Office of Just Transition and $8 million direct support for the communities affected. That's a great step forward. And so we're looking forward to working with them, just like we did with the counties in New Mexico on that transition. Next slide, which I think is the last one. Yep, that's it. So now I'll pause. I got that done pretty quick, Jim. It's 6:48. And let's go ahead and see what's on everybody's mind for questions.
Yeah, Duane, first of all, thank you very much for that. Just a couple of comments and we'll jump into the questions. As much as we all want to see a rapid transition to cleaner energy, I'm thrilled to see that you are not forgetting those people down at the human level that are impacted by this transition, and your emphasis on just transition, I think, is admirable, and I really appreciate that. And for your electric pickup truck, folks, you may want to point out that Ford just announced today the all-electric F-150 Lightning.
Okay. So, I hadn't heard that.
That just came out today, and there's going to be a formal unveiling here in a couple weeks of that. So all attendees, please, if you have any questions, type them into the questions block. I do not see any yet, but fortunately I came armed with some of my own. So let me
make a comment too on what you just mentioned, the just transition. I'll tell you how much it speaks to me. I was newly minted leader of Tri-State. I mean, I came on board literally April Fool's Day of 2019, and House Bill 2061, which was the carbon reduction bill for Colorado, had passed just a couple weeks after that. And it was the first day I was scheduled to meet with the employees at the Craig power plant and the Colorado mine. So the bill passed, and the next morning I was at an all-employee meeting with those folks, and you can imagine how they felt. You know, they were devastated. They didn't know what that meant, and I told them very directly, this means the plant will just continue generating by the end of the decade. It was just the practical reality of it. But you know, I've been so pleased with the response because they've gotten together with the community and they're like, we're going to make this the best transition we can. And it's never easy. It's incredibly hard. But you know, to visit with somebody who says, you know, my dad was a miner and I'm a miner, and now I got to figure out what the next thing is to do. This is a challenge for us. And the people who say, well, let's just do retraining, we'll pay for retraining, they're not really thinking this through, because take a person who's a welder, you're not going to train them to code. I mean, it's just they have a different things they like to do and things they're very well skilled and gifted at. because they were so gifted at those kind of skills, that's why they chose those jobs. And it'd be a waste to not let them continue to use those. So that's why we're working so hard with EPRI's Low Carbon Research Initiative. And we're actually asking everybody that will listen to us in DC or at the state level to help us get a energy storage demonstration project located in Craig, Colorado. And we think we can get there. There's 18 projects the Department of Energy has slated. We've got a number of really powerful elected officials helping us make these requests. And, you know, it would provide hope for the workers there. But it's also, if you think about a hydrogen storage project where you're generating hydrogen and then using it to generate electricity, that's a very complementary skill set to what those people already do. You know, welding, heavy equipment, lots of energy stored, they know how to deal with that. So it'd be the perfect complement for our workforce and a great utilization of that interconnection, which has frankly been evaluated as one of the best places in the Western grid for energy storage at large scale.
Absolutely. The questions are rolling in now. I'm still going to take moderator prerogative and ask you the first one of mine. From a resiliency standpoint, Duane, what do you see as the role of distributed energy and energy storage? So thinking rooftop solar, you know, small battery packs in the responsible energy plan.
So it's not a big part of Tri-State's plan right now because, first of all, we're a wholesale supplier. So we are there to supply the bulk amounts of electricity, and we've seen incredible price advantages by going to utility scale, far more than frankly we'd anticipated. However, it's a part of our members' response, and it's a way for them to mitigate their cost to Tri-State. So you take Tri-State's cost, and yes, there's some transmission and fixed cost in there, and if they can avoid that, it's a benefit for them at their level. So let me just throw some numbers out on cost-wise. A member today can probably develop a local renewable project for somewhere between 4 and 5 cents a kilowatt hour, let's say a solar project at a megawatt scale or so. And for Tri-State, when we build a 100 megawatt or 200 megawatt solar project, we're generally hitting less than 2 cents per kilowatt hour. And in fact, if you look at the 1,000 megawatts that are under development right now of wind and solar, that's coming in at an average price of 1.7 cents per kilowatt hour for all those. It's cheaper than any fossil fuel we could burn. It's the very best option for our members for reducing rates and stabilizing rates. But you know, you compare something less than 2 cents to something that's over 4 cents, there's clearly not an economy there at the generation wholesale level. But at somebody's house, it may still be a very good option for them. So people are building rooftop solar, people are putting in local battery backup for their own reasons. When Tri-State looks at it, we're going to look at massive storage because we're going to get a much lower cost per megawatt hour stored if we build it large than if we build it small.
Next question is, molten salt reactors are showing promise. Can we go after federal money to be a launch customer for NuScale or one of the other upstart SMR companies? And SMR, I believe, stands for small modular reactors.
Let me say very cautiously, I'm watching the Utah municipal group that is working with the, I'm not going to get the name of the national lab up there. I've been to visit it and it's not coming to me right now. But they are working on a small modular reactor, which I think is NuScale. It's not molten salt. It's conventional technology, has a price target of $65 to $75 a megawatt hour, which frankly is going to be very difficult for that to compete with renewables plus storage. So, you know, I hope they're successful. I hope they prove that out. I'm in agreement with the idea that we should be pursuing molten salt type of technology as a country. You know, it's a shame we're kind of back where we were all the way back to Jimmy Carter when he canceled the fast breeder reactor program. And, you know, if only we'd done that, I think where we could be today. And, you know, others have done it. Nuclear is a fantastic baseload resource. I would never recommend to our board that we build a large scale PWR or BWR. You've seen the disasters every time somebody's tried to do it. The cost has been multiples of the budgeted cost, not just a little bit higher, but you know, multiple times higher. So we don't want to bet the company on that technology. I've always been bullish on small modular reactors. When I worked for Associated Electric Cooperative, so 2 jobs ago, and I was the SVP of generation there, we were in partnership with Oak Ridge National Labs, And we're going to be the demonstration site to put a demonstration reactor in partnership with Tennessee Valley Authority at Clinch River, a small modular reactor, B&W design. And when the Obama administration came in, for whatever reason, and I never have understood why, they canceled that program. And now here we are a decade later, just now getting stood back up with the SMR in Utah in the municipal group. So I'd like to see it happen. I'd like to see the federal government stick with their policy a little more and not change so often. And it's critically important for us. I just think because the Utah experiment will get go commercial towards the end of this decade, I don't think Tri-State would be looking at participating in anything until the next decade. So somewhere in the 2030 to 2040 timeframe. And for molten salt, I'll tell you, I think it's closer to 2040 than 2030. I'd love to see it happen.
Yeah, I think that's Idaho National Labs, isn't it? That's working on the modular reactors.
That's right. Yeah, thank you.
Is Tri-State planning to purchase energy from the new Roundhouse Wind Energy Project or the Rail Tie Wind Project in southeastern Wyoming?
No. However, so we just let an RFP for 1,000 megawatts of multiple projects, some wind in eastern Colorado and some solar across our footprint. So that 1,000 megawatts will be coming online between now and 2024. Soon we will be issuing RFPs for that post 2024 piece. And depending on what happens with tax policy, we might even do that sooner rather than later. One of the things we're super excited about is the possibility of getting direct pay tax credits for nonprofit entities like G&T cooperatives. If you see how tax credits work for wind and solar today, you have to be a taxable entity to take advantage of a tax credit. And we are a nonprofit. We allocate any margins to our members and it flows back to them. So there's no taxes. We don't pay taxes. We can't take advantage of a tax credit. It means we have to have a tax equity partner when we develop a renewable project. And all these ones that we're developing are under PPAs so that there can be a third party that has a tax appetite partner with us. Now, when that happens, the third party entity doesn't do that for free. You know, they take 25% or 20% of the benefit of the tax reduction as their part of the game. And so it doesn't all get passed on to the cooperative members and the cooperative customers at the end of the line. What we've argued for and what is finally catching traction, I think for the first time, is the thought of what we call direct pay. So in lieu of giving us a 30% tax credit, what if you gave us 30% of the cost just as a check? Give us the cash. And the difference that makes is it all goes back. And in the case of a cooperative where we're owned by our members, all that flows back to the membership. And so they get a lower cost of renewable energy. It makes it more flexible for us to develop these projects. We don't have to have a middleman, and we'd much prefer to own them. And so I think it will accelerate development of renewables across the country in these areas where municipals and co-ops serve, where they can't take advantage of tax credits. And you know, what's the difference to the federal government? Whether you reduce my taxes by $3,000 or you give me a $3,000 check, it's all the same to the taxpayer at the end of the line. So that's what we're arguing for. And I went way off track, but we're going to be issuing more RFPs, and we do hope to locate some facilities in Wyoming, and that's our expectation that we actually will, based on what gets offered to us in that next round.
Let me stick on to the Wyoming theme with a question of my own. So on April 6, Governor Mark Gordon of Wyoming, he signed a bill creating a $1.2 million fund to support litigation against states that attempt to block coal or coal-fired energy that is generated in Wyoming. As the Tri-State CEO, you are the rope in a tug of war between two polar opposite political viewpoints between Colorado and Wyoming. What impact do you see this having on your ability to accomplish the responsible energy plan?
We're still going to accomplish our responsible energy plan, but I appreciate you raising that issue. One of the great things about Tri-State is its diversity. So I'll just talk about, first of all, just, you know, geographic and resource diversity is fantastic for us, because what we offer is the ability to put resources in many different places that respond in different ways and tie those together for the benefit of our members. And as we're building more renewables, One of the things that's going to make them more reliable is the fact that we can space them out geographically. We have that footprint that's 7% of the continental US. We can use that to our advantage. If you're Excel and you're putting all your wind in eastern Colorado, that's a problem. So when the wind quits blowing in eastern Colorado, you're going to have to find other resources. Tri-State has wind in eastern Colorado, but we're also going to have wind in Wyoming, and we're going to have it other places. So as we expand that, it's going to provide us greater reliability and the equivalence of higher capacity values for those resources we're adding. Again, solar, the sun sets all at once if you're in an area that's north-south, you know, geospatially, but if you can spread solar out east and west, you can create a much more reliable, much more resilient system. So that's the first part of diversity that's so great. And, you know, we sit at the eastern western grid boundary, which is also a tremendous advantage for us as we expand the grid interties. But we also have this diversity of thought around the board table, and we have people from different states that think differently. So that's a good thing. I mean, yeah, they're gonna struggle, but you see, when we passed the Responsible Energy Plan, we had unanimous support for that. And why is that? Because whether you're in Wyoming where you're trying to say, well, let's keep coal running as long as we can, or if you're in New Mexico or Colorado where you're saying we want to advance the green energy transition as rapidly as we can, everybody agrees on two things: reliability and affordability. So no matter where you sit on how fast you should transition, you can agree on that. And what Tri-State has found is by building at utility scale, we're able to develop resources below the cost of any fossil fuels. And so wherever you stand on that, we can say we're going to burn less expensive fuel and we're going to replace it with cheaper renewable energy. Everybody can agree on that.
So next question is, do you have any details of how Tri-State will pay its $3 billion debt without a rate increase to member cooperatives?
Yeah, read Moody's report. So we go to New York every year for a rating update, and we get ratings from Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch. So these are independent rating analysts who are, their job is to say, how secure is Tri-State's debt and how likely is Tri-State to repay that debt? I think it's one of the greatest false narratives that's been told about Tri-State is that somehow we're not going to be able to service that debt and pay it down. And so look at the independent analysts and what they've said. That's what I'd offer first. So Moody's just reaffirmed our A credit rating as stable. And if you compare us to investor-owned utilities in the region, you'll see that that's as good as or slightly better than our peers. And so I say, first of all, it looks like we're likely to repay the debt based on third-party evaluation. And what we just did was reduce rates rather than increase rates. When we look at our long-term financial forecast, it was filed as part of our energy resource plan with the state of Colorado. You'll see that our rates are not scheduled to go up before the end of the decade. And again, one of the big misinformation campaigns that's been directed against Tri-State is those people who say, well, their rates are going to skyrocket. Well, they're looking at a projection that goes out to 2050. Now, who in the world knows what rates are going to be in 2050? But if you look at what's in there, it says our rates are basically reducing and then flat between now and 2030. And then after 2030, they increase at a rate lower than the rate of inflation that's in the model. So I think that means that in real terms, our power is going to become more and more competitive as time goes on, rather than more and more expensive.
Next question. I understand you have signed a letter of intent with Newmont to pilot hydrogen at a plant in New Mexico. Could you say a bit more about that project, and could that technology, if successful, be used to resuscitate some of the coal plants in Colorado that are otherwise going to be taken offline?
That is a fantastic question. I'm glad that you asked about that. I forgot to mention that earlier. So we have signed a letter of intent with the company, I think it's called, I'm missing it, H2 Energy. I got that not quite right, but it's H2 Power, H2 Energy. I'm sorry to be vague on that. And so let me rewind a little bit. Last year, we retired the Escalante plant early. It was a coal plant, totally capable of running for another decade or more, but we retired it early, helped reduce our carbon, helped reduce some cost. And now we're into the decommissioning phase. As I mentioned, we're putting a solar project there. The board was very generous with employee severance and with community support in the transition. But now a developer has approached us and said, what if we made that a demonstration project for blue hydrogen? And blue hydrogen is where you take natural gas and you convert it to hydrogen and carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is injected underground or sold, and and for oil recovery typically, and then you can produce with hydrogen in the coal plant energy instead of coal, and so the emissions are nil. You sequestered the carbon, and this is what they want to try to do. And what they have as a benefit is they're going to get a coal plant for next to nothing, which normally would have been a very expensive proposition, and one that's well equipped and ready to run. Now, that doesn't mean their challenges are over. The investors are working hard to find people who will support this investment. There's obviously some risk involved, and they have to prove, while all these technologies are proven at smaller scale, they're not necessarily ever been combined and operated into a fully functional plant. And this will be the key, what they're trying to demonstrate. I think the economics for this are very, very challenging for them, but they have some ideas of things they can do that are going to overcome some of the economics. So I hope that they're successful. I sincerely, sincerely hope so, because if they are, it indeed will form a model and a blueprint for other locations, such as Craig, such as Laramie River Station in Wyoming, and others. So, you know, I wish them the very best. We're working with them right now on their due diligence. There's lots of bridges to cross, but it's an ambitious and exciting development. And again, we're extremely hopeful that it would work. And just think of the benefits it would bring back to that community in New Mexico, you know, restore so many jobs, and they'd be great paying jobs at that. So wishing them the best.
How does Tri-State view hydroelectric power as a significant part of its renewable portfolio?
Well, the hydro we have is fantastic, and it's mostly provided by the federal government through the Western Area Power Administration. In addition, Tri-State has a stake in some smaller hydroelectric projects. It's not an area I see growing. The hydro that's developed now, I think, is about what we're going to get. It's extremely difficult to permit a new hydro project, nor would we even try, actually. But I think the one area that would be beneficial for us is pump storage hydro, and I have heard from a couple developers that are in our region that hold FERC licenses for pump storage. And you know, when you think about proven large-scale storage, that is one of the best and currently available, and it's proven. So I'm bullish on the pump storage. I can't see us developing more, except for maybe possibly a few very small projects. I can't see us developing any more large-scale pondage storage hydro.
Let me see what we have next here. Will you look into geothermal energy as a baseload resource?
So I had an outreach recently from a person that's living near the Continental Divide that does a lot of work in the geothermal energy space, and I think it's intriguing. Turns out there's work to be done, and this was news to me in terms of proving out the resource. We know there's a resource, but the question is, can it be economically, can we get to it economically? And in order to do that, it's going to take an investment of somebody that's kind of a wildcatter, you know, somebody wants to drill a really, really deep well, and they're going to sink a lot of money into that. And whether at the end of the day it produces or not enough heat at the volumes needed is a question. So we're not the people with that check to write, but if anybody has any billionaire friends that want to do that, we'd be happy to work with them on getting that project up and going on that test hole. So it just couldn't be us. I'm sorry. We don't have that capital.
So here's a question asking you to divulge your secrets. What is your secret that provided rate reductions as well as greater renewables when other utilities are saying costs will go up significantly due to batteries?
Okay, so our board, first of all, we're co-op and we're owned by our members. And one of the secrets is that we face the people who pay the bills in our boardroom every month. So every time we talk about budgets or costs, I'm looking the people in the eye and they're looking me in the eye that write the check for that. So I think as a whole, and Jim, you know this, serving on the Mountain View board, co-ops tend to be very sensitive to cost. And so we don't tend to get real fat like some entities would. And let me just say, frankly, an investor-owned utility, primary responsibility is to their shareholders. The customers are there to provide a stream of revenue to allow the shareholders to earn a return on their investment. So the incentive structure is different. That's why we have public utility commissions. That's why they were created, was to keep the investor-owned utilities in check, because they have a natural incentive to go out and build and build and build and build, and everything they build put into rate base and earn a rate of return. their incentive is different. You know, it's like, oh, you're going to force me to shut down a plant and build a new one. Oh, gee, too bad. I'm going to get another return from my investors. So they don't mind that nearly as much as a co-op who says, my members, the farmers at the end of the line, the ranchers, paid for this plant that they now have to shut down before they got the full benefit of it. So, you know, there's a little bit different sense of that. Around our board table, they said, we want to do the energy transition, but we don't want to have an increase in rates. You're going to reduce rates. And I'm like, oh boy, that seems like a really tough challenge. But we're getting there, and part of it's a little bit of a bet, right? We've identified some cost savings. Part of it is what I call the green energy dividend. As we are developing renewables at costs lower than our existing fossil fuel plants, we're saving our members money. That's providing us headroom, first and foremost, to eat the stranded investment costs. So the coal that we've already announced shutting down still had $800 million of value on our balance sheet that hasn't yet been recovered through rates. So that's a lot to eat, right? That's $800 million of what we call stranded investment. But we're able to eat it without increasing rates because the new energy that's coming in is cheaper than the old energy it's replacing. So that's the other part of this. But the other thing is our employees are very engaged in a massive corporate-wide cost-cutting effort. We're looking at reducing expenses, increasing revenues, and improving efficiencies. So when I talked about the fact that we went to this market, the Western Energy Imbalance Service, and by the way, we also went into the Western Energy Imbalance Market in New Mexico, which is CalISO run. Those markets bring greater efficiency to buying energy to serve your load. When you get into a regional market, you're no longer looking at resources when you're within your area. You're able to go out and look at resources across the entire footprint, multiple states. And if something's cheaper than something I'm running right now, then that energy can come in and replace it. So that greater efficiency is going to be a benefit for our members and help us reach these goals. Now, at the end of the day, are we going to get the $48 million of cost reduction we're seeking right now under the 4% rate decrease? Or are we going to get the $111 million or whatever, 100 million plus goal we have? I don't know. And I think that's a real serious challenge, but we are going to reduce rates and they're going to be lower than they are today in the future.
And if I could just add a little context to that, while there may be some utilities talking about rates going up, switching to renewables, our neighbors in Xcel Energy Colorado to the north here, in their 2018 all-source solicitation, they were getting bids for wind plus battery storage at 1.9 cents a kilowatt hour, which was about half of the cost of just the O&M for an existing coal plant. So at least on the front range, the advantages, I think, are being seen by a lot of utilities. A lot of interest in hydrogen. Duane, here's another one. The 840 megawatt Intermountain Power Project and separate Magnum Development Advanced Clean Energy Storage Project in Delta, Utah are scheduled to enter commercial operation in 2025. Will Tri-State take advantage of the hydrogen that will be stored in the salt cavern there with the capacity to store 150,000 megawatt hours for long duration renewable energy storage?
We're not planning to. However, we are trying to seek an opportunity to demonstrate this technology at Craig. The Craig substation is in, again, what has been assessed as the best location in the Western grid for large scale storage. It's well connected to the other parts of Tri-State service area, and it's well connected to serve other utility entities in the West. Right now, there's some cost challenges with hydrogen, and we'd like to see those costs reduced. We are part of EPRI's, the Electric Power Research Institute's Low Carbon Research Initiative, and we're a funder at the tune of $1 million, but there's $100 million of money that's went into this initiative. So basically, our $1 million investment is leveraged 100 times by being part of this research group. And so they're actively exploring whether it's hydrogen or ammonia or a flow battery. What we're looking for is that storage technology that has massive economies of scale because we want to build it big. We're also, as I mentioned, talking with our federal counterparts about potential demonstration projects and or grant money that could be available to help us develop such a project within our service territory.
I think this next question gets to the issue of dispatchable energy in the grid. let's see, why do you define, let's see, did I lose it here? Why do you define batteries as generators? They need a generator to charge them up before they can discharge.
I'm going to guess that this comment might be related to a battery dispute we're having with one of our members at United Power. So the largest member of Tri-State is United Power, and they serve a rapidly growing part of the Front Range. And one of the issues we have with them is a dispute over how we pay for a battery, or what the charge that is appropriate for a battery that might be installed on a system. So the way we view it, we think is consistent with the way the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission views it, which is that batteries and energy storage devices should be treated as generators to the extent that they push energy onto the grid. And what that means is that by having that generator, you're reducing energy related costs. You're also reducing the costs related for generation capacity, but you don't actually reduce the cost of transmission, because that generator still needs a transmission line to move its power on and off the grid. And when that generator is not running, the power still needs to be delivered to the entity. So someone has to pay for the transmission. And if by putting a battery in, you say, I no longer have to pay for transmission, then that shifts that cost to other people who aren't participating in the battery. So that's our position on that. However, United Power has a different opinion, and we respect that. And the way we're going to resolve it is we've got it before the Federal Energy Commission as an issue to be decided. And whatever they decide is what we'll live with. And the good thing about the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is that all of our members have an equal voice in whatever if they want to have their voice heard in that proceeding, if they want to intervene. We had previous discussion on this going on before the Colorado PUC, and unfortunately, when that came up and when the members in Wyoming said we want to comment, they were told you're not allowed to have a voice in this forum. You know, we're just for Colorado utilities. New Mexico members wanted to have a voice in that forum. They were told you don't get to have a voice. So all of Tri-State, as being an interstate commerce utility, just like any other interstate wholesale provider, in fact, just like the contracts that are served by Xcel, when Xcel sells power to a cooperative, they do it under a federal tariff that is regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So the Colorado PUC does not regulate those transactions, and they currently don't regulate transactions between Tri-State and its members, because that's wholesale power and interstate commerce that is regulated by FERC. So that's where that dispute is. And again, you know, we'll make our case, and United Power make their case, and they've got some unique arguments to make. So if that's the case and the judge decides that's the best way to go, we'll certainly live with that decision.
I have two similar questions. I'll try to combine into one here. So what is your most challenging design condition? 4 a.m. on a cold day in January, or a high pressure system that stalls over the Midwest and creates 4 days of no wind?
Well, if those both happen the same day, that's a really, really bad day, okay? So wind typically blows harder at night than during the day, and wind resource can be very predictable. This is something that's was big learning for us as we went through this in Arkansas. It turns out you can get really good weather forecasts now, so good that if you're in an organized power market, you can actually do very well, make money for your members by scheduling wind a whole day in advance. And it's even more reliable if you can cover a broad geographic area, so you know that a weather front end going to move through all of it at once at the same time. So that's the 4 a.m. thing. I mean, when there's a high pressure and the wind stalls, it's very tough for us. I think I mentioned earlier that February 13th through 17th was the worst period I've had in terms of power supply reliability concerns in my 38, now 39-year career. It was extremely tight. So as we rely more heavily on wind and more heavily on renewables, we're also going to have that dispatchable something that backs it up. So this is probably the moment when we should have a little bit of an honest conversation about our energy resource plan. We filed an ERP with the Colorado PUC as required. And in that, we said, when we retire the Craig, Colorado coal units at the end of this decade, we propose to put in a gas-based plant. Now, I know that's an emitting plant, but the thing is, when we get to that week of 5 days when there's no wind and it's overcast and solar's limited, we can turn that thing on. Now, in terms of annual emissions, it's extremely low because it doesn't run very much. But it's there when we really have to have it, and it's there to preserve that first priority of ours, which is reliability. Now, it's possible that the Colorado PUC will agree with us. It's also possible that they say, well, we want to see you put in some other technology that doesn't emit. And that'll be more challenging for us. Batteries right now are not affordable at the 2 and 3 and 4 days of storage level. And we don't have like a developer's begging us to build pump storage hydro, although there might be a project available. But to have the number of megawatt hours stored in a device for that amount of time is pretty challenging. That's why we're looking at hydrogen. That's why we're talking about ammonia as a potential, and or a flow battery or something that we can store energy in extremely large quantities on site without supply chain delivery risk. And let me add one more thing. If we do end up with a gas-based plant in an ERP, today you can submit orders for utility scale gas generators that are convertible to hydrogen. In addition, there's some really cool research being done at Colorado State University's Powerhouse Energy Campus. Just had the opportunity to visit with Brian Wilson there, and they're doing some really good work on hydrogen firing within utility engines.
Yeah, let me follow up on that, Duane. So last year we had as a guest speaker Alice Jackson, CEO of Xcel Energy Colorado, and she was talking about the impressive advances in the artificial intelligence software, predictive software for wind, where they can now focus with pretty decent accuracy and sometimes extreme accuracy to specific areas of a wind farm or specific wind farms and get hourly, all the way out to 24, 48 hour predictions. Are you seeing similar successes in your predictive software for your wind turbines?
Yes. Now, it's not us running it, but there are individuals now that can develop those forecasts for us. And as I mentioned, I guess, so previous to this job, I was a CEO for the Arkansas Electric Cooperative Network. And at that time, we were developing wind mostly in Oklahoma, frankly. And just as we were developing the wind, we went into regional energy markets where it's a big advantage to know a day in advance what your energy needs are going to be. You get punished if you deviate from that. Well, we had incredible success at bidding in wind a day in advance. So the deal is by 9 o'clock this morning, you would have had to tell the market what you're going to be running the next day. And then the market computer would look at all the options and tell you whether you get to run or not. If you're a thermal plant or if you're a renewable plant, you run. But if you don't run the way you said, you have to buy in balance for the market, and typically that's going to be at an economic disadvantage. We were so successful with wind that the forecasts were so good, we could consistently make money in the market with wind. And the way you make money in the market is by being extremely accurate in your forecasts.
Next question is the status of transmission lines, and let me add to that another piece. Tri-State recently made a decision not to join in the collaborative effort for the Eastern Colorado transmission loop, which would tie in a number of wind farms on the eastern side of the state. Could you talk a little bit about that decision?
Yeah, so we were pretty excited to work with Xcel to help scope out the Colorado Power Pathways project, which is a double circuit 345,000 volt transmission project that goes kind of in a reverse letter C. It moves out. I'm not sure which direction I have to move my hand, but it goes east and then south and then back west, kind of circles the eastern part of the state where all the wind is, so the eastern plains. And the primary purpose of that project is to integrate wind energy from the eastern plains back to the Front Range. So the primary need for Tri-State isn't so much that as we're building wind out on the eastern plains, but our load centers aren't on the Front Range. Our load is everywhere else. And so when we look at that project, we actually had needs to move power intrastate, multiple states, and it just wasn't a perfect fit for us. We're going to pursue our own project. We wish it could have worked for us to work with Xcel, and I admire what they're doing. Absolutely admire it. I think it's the right move for them and for the state. It's just not the best thing economically for Tri-State. And for us, we need to find a project that can help us move energy as we build out. And we're trying to serve load across multiple states with projects that are located. There's a lot of great solar opportunity in New Mexico, a lot of great wind in Colorado, and there's great wind in Wyoming. And then we'll even put more projects in other places. But we need the ability to move that energy around across state lines.
I know we're running out of time. I think we have time for a couple questions, some more here. Were there to be a federal 100% clean electricity standard by 2035, what would be the main challenges to get there for Tri-State?
So when we issued our responsible energy plan, we had a goal of 100% by 2040, without really knowing how we get there, but just kind of a belief that the technology will let us get there by then. I think 2035 is a little ambitious to be 100%. We're going to get to 80% in Colorado by 2030. We'll be 70% clean energy across our entire multi-state footprint by then. And that last part is the hardest part. Every bit of that, and the bounding factor for us is reliability, and it's that the thing I keep falling back on is how are you going to get through a 4-day winter event, which typically craters your solar and wind production. So how are you going to store enough energy to get you through that? That's the kind of defining, controlling factor. If you can get through that, then you probably can get through about anything else in terms of reliability. But will we have enough of that storage technology by 2035 to let that happen is the question.
Do you have, Duane, do you have time for one more here?
Let's make one more, you bet.
Okay. What plans does Tri-State have for carbon dioxide removal?
So right now we're not focused on carbon dioxide removal. We were a funder and participant in the XPRIZE effort, which has found an opportunity for use of carbon dioxide beneficially. But right now the economics of carbon dioxide removal it's just a very expensive thing to do. And we think it's going to be cheaper for our members to pursue a renewable plus storage plan than a carbon dioxide removal for fossil fuel plan.
Well, thank you. And we had a lot of great questions that I was not able to get to. Thank you for all of these, folks. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question. I tried to mix and match a variety of different topics. We will post the slides, and thank you for allowing us to do that, Duane. We will post the slides on secres.org. That's secres.org. And also at CRES-energy.org, you can find the video of tonight's webinar. Duane, thank you very much for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule to speak to us tonight. I found this extremely informative, and I hope everyone else did. And we look forward to seeing the accomplishments of the Responsible Energy Plan in the future.
Well, thank you all so much for giving me part of your evening and give me the chance to talk about something I enjoy talking about, which is where we're going with this energy future. I apologize for having to cut a little short, but I'm really grateful that you gave me that benefit to be able to do that so I can tend to my other business. And wish you all the very best evening, and look forward to visiting with you again.
Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.